Good evening and welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda, and as president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are turned off or set to vibrate. All phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the Commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition other than the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the Commission during the question and answer phase of the Commission's deliberations. And in case you weren't able to keep track of all of the timings there, our Vice President is I'm tasking him with keeping track of timing for everybody so that it's all fair. Do you agree to that? Okay. Subdivision plat and development plat petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing, even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We understand there may be several persons who wish to speak tonight. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's take a roll call.
Ransberg.
Present.
Guggenberger.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Zuzen.
Present.
Pike.
Here.
Kaufman. Kaufman is absent. Spencer. Spencer is absent.
We have a quorum. However, I would like to point out that because we do not have a full board available, if any of the petitioners wish to have their case heard by the full board, then you might consider whether or not a request for continuance is something you want to consider. So, moving on to the approval of meeting minutes from June 24th, 2024. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes? Any edits, corrections,
I make a motion to
observations?
approve as presented.
Second.
The motion being heard and approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Meeting minutes are approved. We are now moving on to the public comment section of the meeting. This is an opportunity for those present to speak to any items that are not already on tonight's agenda. If you want to talk about something that's on tonight's agenda, then wait for that item to be called. But if something different you'd like to speak to, this is your opportunity, the only opportunity during the evening to come forward and let us know what you think. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak on any item other than those that are already on tonight's agenda? Okay, going once, going twice. Having nobody come forward, the public comment section of our meeting is now closed. Request for continuances or agenda modifications. I understand we have two, is that correct?
We do. The first one that was already on your agenda for a continuance, petition ZA 24-05, the Silver Spring rezone, which is located on 900 North, or 900 East, I'm sorry. The staff is requesting a second continuance. This was continued once already because we were working with the petitioner on some design items. This request is because a traffic study is underway and has not yet been submitted to staff for review. They are doing it in conjunction with the development in Brownsburg, so we want to see that and review it prior to making any recommendation to this commission. This is a second request for staff, but would not require additional notice.
Okay. And Mr. Taylor, is there a limit on the number of continuances that can be requested by staff?
Not by staff.
Only by the petitioner? Okay. We'd like to take a motion on this particular request for a continuance, or if there's any discussion about it.
I move to approve the continuance as requested.
I'll second.
Motion having been heard and seconded, we'll take a vote.
Ransberg,
For?
Guckenberger, 4. Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike,
4.
Motion carries. I understand there's a second continuance being requested?
Yes, thank you. This is number 6.3 on the agenda, the PUDA 2402, known as the Wind Farms PUD Amendment. You'll see the petitioner there is Gordon Kreitz. He is no longer with Steppenworth and Associates, and the owner of the property would like some more time to retain counsel for this petition before proceeding. Therefore, he has made a request to continue 1 month to August 26th. We had a significant amount of written remonstrance on this petition, and we attempted today to contact as many as we could to let them know that it was expected to be continued. And I think we got through to most of them, but there were a few still here tonight.
Okay. And is this the first continuance that's
Yes.
been requested by petitioner?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Any discussion or comments before entertaining a motion?
Do you anticipate any other outstanding information from them, or is it simply that they were seeking time to get new counsel on the extension request?
Seeking time to get new counsel. When the council comes in, they might want to do a neighborhood meeting or something like that. So I wouldn't see another continuance as out of the question. But the purpose of this one is to retain new counsel.
If anyone would like to propose a motion?
I make a motion that we continue PUDA 24-02 Wind Farms PUD Amendment as requested.
I'll second.
Motion having been proposed and seconded, let's take a vote.
Ransberg,
For?
Guckenberger, 4. Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike,
4.
Motion carries. Do we have any old business?
We do not.
Moving on to new business, DPR 2409, Avon Commons expansion.
Go forward. Okay, thank you. This is a development plan approval for the Avon Commons Shopping Center, which would commonly be known to you as the one that includes Dick's and Target, Ulta's in there, some others. This is for the end cap or the end of the shopping center, which most recently contained Payless shoes. They are wanting to do a 6,000 square foot building addition onto the east end of the shopping center and then move the drive that goes around the back of the building further out towards Ronald Reagan Parkway. The existing shopping center was built in 2001 and 2002. A small portion of the site is currently undergoing an annexation petition to be incorporated into the town of Avon. Currently zoned C2, and then in Hendricks County, it's general business GB. This portion of the site is 9.53 acres. So this is the site outlined in white, and the small portion in red here is the annexation parcel I was speaking of. And that's important because the addition's going right here on the end, and so the drive and the drainage are in that small parcel that are proposed to be annexed. This is the current zoning, so you'll see it's predominantly or all C2 in this area. The portion of Hendricks County that's being annexed is expected to come in as C2. So the entire site will be C2. This is a zoomed in area of the end of the Avon Commons, and the area in white is approximately where the building addition would go. And then the drive would be moved further east where some of the treed area is right here. This is another drawing of it showing where the building addition is proposed to go on the end of this building. And this is the civil drawing for the same thing, building addition here, and drive to go around the side of the building. It is zoned, again, C2. It is within both of our overlays, so that it's in Tier 3 of the U.S. Corridor Overlay District, and it's within the Ronald Reagan Corridor Overlay District. The building itself is in Tier 3. The parking lot is in Tier 2. This request is consistent with C2 as well as both overlay districts. This particular building, because it's located along an arterial street, which is what Ronald Reagan is required to meet the architectural standards along that side of the facade, in addition to the front of the building. And so up top here is the front of the building. This tall piece here and over is existing, and then this piece is new. But you'll see it's been designed to match the building. And then this facade is what will face Ronald Reagan. Originally, it came in with a fairly blank wall, and it's been redesigned with parts of the building that project out, and then windows and such to meet the standards of the ordinance. Additionally, in reviewing the site, it was noticed that a lot of the landscaping of the parking lot did not meet current standards, and it appeared that predominantly it was due to age and trees dying or coming out and not being replaced. So this landscape plan that's been provided by the petitioner, the darker trees, and it's kind of hard to see them, but the ones that are dark are existing, and then the lighter ones are all replacements, including ones along the parking here. The area that's actually adjacent to the building is fairly wooded and would count for the landscaping that's required on that side. Additionally, this site sits way below Ronald Reagan, so it will likely not even be seen from Ronald Reagan because of the wooded area and the change in elevation. So we are recommending approval subject to our 3 standard conditions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
So if I may, so you mentioned that there's a annexation going on. So when the annex is complete, if
we approve this, then that portion of the property becomes C2 as opposed to, and until it's annexed, it's in the county. If for some reason annexation would get extended, the developer would have to work with county.
So we have an agreement with Hendricks County that once an annexation's applied for, they go through development review with us.
Okay.
And we wouldn't see any reason why this annexation wouldn't go through. When annexations do go through, it's up to the zoning administrator to determine what zone it comes in as. So we look at what it's surrounded by, basically, and determine that. So we would determine this to be C2 because of the surrounding.
Thank you.
Could you go back to the slide that shows the whole red area? So when the annexation, will the entire area be annexed?
No, just the portion within the white.
So we're just going to have this little tiny part
That's all right of way for Ronald Reagan, and it's
Okay.
owned by the county commissioners.
Okay, good enough.
Well, that was going to be my question. Is there any other land that needs to be annexed in at the same time? Or is that just the last piece out there?
That's the last piece of this shopping center, yes.
And then just to the east of that is the bridge anyhow, which is
Correct.
governed by the county.
Correct.
Okay.
So you talked about the landscaping standards and how, as part of this, they need to replant a number of plants in order to come into compliance. How does that generally work? I mean, for my own edification, if a development subsequently falls out of compliance of the landscaping standards that they agreed to, is that a code enforcement matter, or how
Yes.
does that? Okay.
Yes, it would be up to us to notice it or someone to complain about it. We do landscape inspections at the end of a development. So when this is completed, we will do a landscape inspection, but we don't go out there once a year and check for dead trees. Unfortunately, it's just not part of our practices.
So with that, onto that same question, what is the condition of the other landscaping within that development? Because that's a pretty big development.
I did not inspect the area where Target is. It's something we could go out and do a check of. Because of the age of the shopping center, probably the rest of the shopping center falls under the same situation.
Yeah, so to that point, would I guess, is it the same petitioner, right, that owns the entire development? And so the entire development then needs to be in compliance with the landscaping standards, or is it?
It is a different owner. What I've outlined in white is the current owner of this site.
Okay,
And then the next yellow line going up and down on the other side of Target is all one owner.
okay, thanks.
Any further questions for staff? There's no further questions. We'll ask the petitioner to come forward. And you have 10 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Mark Thorpe. I'm with Y Engineers. We are the civil engineers and land surveyors on the project. For the record, our office is located at 10505 North College Avenue, Indianapolis, 46280. The owner is Aviana, and Carnegie Management Group is the managing partner, and Mr. Tim Morin is here also from Ohio. He's traveled in tonight to help answer any questions that you might have about the project. I think the staff has done a great job in summarizing this. We learned very early when we first met with the staff about the annexation issue, so the next week we applied for the annexation to get that resolved. As my understanding, it's been approved by Avon and just waiting on Hendricks County. Is that correct? I'm not sure the process there.
It hasn't had a final reading in Avon yet, but we
Okay.
don't
Okay.
foresee any issues.
So that's something that we've worked with them very closely on. But as she mentioned, there's two 3,000 square foot vacant spaces on the east end. One was Payless, and the tenant that we have that we're working with needs 12,000 square feet. So that's the reason that we're adding on the additional 6,000 square feet and pushing the service drive around. One thing that back here, this is the trash enclosure currently. It was a wooden structure, didn't meet code or standards, and with the building addition, it's now in a bad location. So that has been relocated further south, and that has been brought up to standards for that. So that's something that we've worked with staff on as well. And like she said, we've increased the landscaping. One nice thing is that we've got a nice paved area out front with parking, so we don't have to add any additional parking spaces for this project. We were well within the standards for that, so we did look into that as well. So that's about it. We'd happy to answer any questions you might have.
You're not asking for any special exceptions or any waivers?
No, sir.
It's a miracle. I'm curious about the landscaping. And I know this, whenever landscaping is mentioned, this always becomes an issue. Bradford pears. Do you know what kind of trees there are there now? And what are you anticipating planting to bring
So,
the landscape up to code?
sure. So most of the parking lot trees we're proposing, honey locust. They're good street trees, good for surviving pollution, those kind of things. You see that commonly with this type of development. And then we are adding shrubs also. There's not hardly any shrubs out there, so we are adding shrubs for the requirements in the landscape islands as well. But we have improved this area here. There's a detention pond right here. And so between the parking and the detention, we've beefed up that to meet the parking requirements. And I don't have those species with me. I think they're in the package, but
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank
great.
you.
Thank you very much.
Now we move on to those who would like to remonstrate against this, who are against this project. If anybody signed up to speak out against this proposal, now's the time to come forward.
Or they could be for it.
Well, that would come in afterwards. We have rules, you know.
No one has signed up for this petition.
Has anybody signed up in support of the project
No one has signed up for this petition at all.
at all? Okay.
Sheet split up in favor and against, or is it just sign up? I think it's just sign up, right?
It is just sign up. Actually, Paul and I were talking about wanting to add that column, and we didn't get a chance to this month, but next month we're going to have that.
Would the petitioner like to rebut the no interest in this proposal? No. Okay, very good. Discussion.
I appreciate the staff working with the petitioner in identifying the need to beef up and improve its existing landscaping as part of this. So I'm glad that that's being done, and hopefully will continue to be done in similar type of petitions. Because yeah, it's very easy for these things to go under the radar, plants to die, and then just not follow through. So I appreciate the staff looking into that.
I think staff has done a good job of representing the case here as it's written in their staff report. I think it's pretty straightforward. In addition, the petitioners working with staff, no waivers, no exceptions.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously meets, it's going to be exactly like the building that is already there, it's my understanding, so it just makes sense. And if it means we can bring in a tenant to fill that space who is happy to be there, then that's good for everybody. Empty space is never a good thing. Empty commercial space. Any further discussion, comments? Any other questions for staff or the petitioner? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll go and make that motion that we approve DPR 24-09, the Avon Commons expansion, subject to the conditions noted in the staff report.
Second.
Having heard a motion and having the motion being seconded, we can take a vote.
Ransberg,
4,
Guckenberger,
4.
Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike.
motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Move on to our next item, which is the MAP 2408 Rivendell preliminary plat.
Okay. Okay, this is a request for preliminary plat approval. The rezoning for this was reviewed by you in March. It was called the Kenneck Derringer rezoning at that time. And this is a request for major subdivision preliminary plat approval for 23.4 acres into 39 lots. The rezoning was approved by Plan Commission in March and then approved by Town Council on April 11th of this year. It's located at 6590 East County Line Road 100 South, or County Road 100 South, zoned R2. This is the subject site here in white, bordered by single-family residential all around with the exception of the Washington Township Water Park here. This is how the proposed subdivision fits into the site there. This is the same subdivision, just flipped on its side. North is to your right, showing you how it would be developed, essentially with 3 cul-de-sacs, one long one to the north, and then 2 shorter ones that would extend to the east, with 8 lots apiece on those smaller ones. It will be the addition of 39 lots throughout here, and then one of the original residual part of the original parcels is here shown as Block A. The plat complies with all the standards of the UDO regarding subdivision regulations, with the exception of one waiver request that they have made, and that is for the cul-de-sac bulbs, these 2 right here. The subdivision regulations require the right-of-way radius width for those bulbs to be 60 feet, and the petitioner has requested that they be 50 feet. Staff has done quite a bit of research on this, and what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate on the bulb of a cul-de-sac in a residential neighborhood that has 8 lots fronting on it. From where Paul and I come from, 50 foot is the requirement. So 50 foot is not a standard that's out of the question. It's used by many communities. Plainfield, for example, uses 50 feet. Brownsburg uses 55 feet. Hendricks County uses 60 feet, like us. The purpose of the requirement is generally for safety for trucks that go down in there, for a fire truck, a school bus, or a trash truck to be able to make the loop and get back out. Our Department of Public Works Director has reviewed this and is okay with the waiver request, given the short length of the cul-de-sac, the small number of homes that would front on the cul-de-sac, and also that the Washington Township Avon Fire Department has reviewed it and is okay with the waiver request. There are 4 criteria that need to be met in order for a waiver to be granted. I've listed them here for you, and I've listed them in your staff report with the petitioner's response to those criteria. I want to go first to this diagram, which is not in your packet. I added it today, and it may be a little hard to see this, but this represents the Washington Township fire trucks, and that length and schematic was given to us by Washington Township. And then on there is red lines, which it's easier to see for the screen behind you, but not so much for this one over here. But there are red lines showing the truck can make the turn completely within the pavement of a cul-de-sac bulb that is 50-foot radius. So the Washington Township Fire Department has given their recommendation of approval for this waiver. The fire trucks, obviously, by this diagram, can get down them. The school has told us they won't go down them, that the kids would come out from the cul-de-sac. The only thing left is trash trucks. Sometimes trash trucks, because of their modern way of emptying trash bins with mechanical arms, can have to make some 3-point turns, but that's typical now in most cul-de-sacs, quite frankly. So we believe the safety concerns have been satisfied for these cul-de-sacs, which is criteria 1 out of the 4 that you're required to determine have been met in order to grant the waiver. We don't believe, for criteria 2, that we don't believe it will contradict the intent of the design standards because the safety aspects have been met. The petitioner's representative will likely go in to describe how the site is wooded and has slopes, and essentially if we make the cul-de-sac bulbs bigger, it would push these lots over here closer to these neighboring lots, and all we're getting out of it is additional pavement that we don't need, and staff would concur with that response to finding number 2. Criterion 3, again, talks about the slopes of the property and the wooded areas along the edge of the property that would be impacted if the cul-de-sac bulbs were larger. And we do think that it enhances the development in the surrounding area, again, because the homes will not be pushed out towards the adjacent properties any more than they have to be, and no additional trees would have to be taken down. Although there's not, out of the site is wooded, this particular line isn't heavily wooded, but there is a tree line there. They did submit sample building elevations, which are in your packet. I did not include them here, but they would be required to be reviewed and approved prior to issuance of any permits. And I do want to touch on the entrance here because I believe that's why most folks are here tonight. And the design of this entrance for where this new road, which is going to be called Rivendell Drive, I think, enters onto 100 South. And the design of that roadway must meet the Avon standards. And that's not been finalized yet, but it does, they have not requested any waivers of those requirements. So it would still have to meet Avon standards. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
But that has nothing to do with the waiver request.
With the waiver request, you're considering correct.
So on the subdivision or the circle, if we're with the research that you've done and you're finding that the county has 60, so I'm assuming that when we did the UDO, we probably mirrored what we had for the county or what the county had. But are you finding that 50, 55 foot is more common in towns than 60? And are we looking at, we need to make a revision to our UDO if that's, because is this going to be repeated in future developments?
That's quite possible. I actually did some measuring of our own cul-de-sacs that we already have, and most of them are at 50. So I don't know what the old ordinance said, but I thought I was looking at some newer developments and they were done at 50. And I don't know whether that was done without a waiver being requested or if a waiver was granted and I just haven't found record of it yet. I did some quick search today.
Okay.
But I do believe that's the direction we're heading because it's just there to have more pavement that we have to maintain has to provide drainage for, and we do not believe that it's necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's only two things that we are looking at tonight, correct, as a commission? One being the subdivision plat approval, which if it meets all the conditions, it's not discretionary. We have to approve it if it meets the ordinance, correct? So that's the
Correct.
first thing. Second thing is the waiver regarding the cul-de-sac size, right? So that's the only two things that we have discretion to make decisions about tonight.
Correct.
Thanks.
I do have another question because you called this out on the sidewalks that the plans don't show an asphalt path in front of lot 40 or block A. Can you talk more about that?
That actually is required. And I was going to bring that up to the petitioner's representative, and he's talking about this piece here, right?
Right, yes.
So that is required as part of the plat, and it can be added as a condition. I was going to tack it on the final plat when it came in, but you're
Okay,
correct.
do we need to do that here or is
You
it?
can add it as an extra condition, yes.
Okay.
Do we have the confirmation from the fire department in writing?
I do. I have an email here from Levi.
Okay, email, right, okay. My only question then is, are we going to allow street parking? And if there's vehicles parked on the street, when the fire truck comes in, are they still going to be able to make that turn?
So I also talked about that. Generally, when there's lots all the way around the bulb, there's so many driveways and not enough intervening curb to even park cars. But when they do, and on this one, you could see that there definitely could be someone at the end because there's no driveways there. I did talk to the fire department about that, and they said it's the issue is getting in and getting into the bulb and for timing. And getting out is when they have to turn around, and if they have to make a 3-point turn, that's not generally an issue for safety.
So they can take their time leaving.
Yes.
It's just that they need to be able to get in quickly.
This might be a question for the petitioner, but if you know, if we held to this 60-foot or 60-foot radius, would that reduce the number of lots? Is that one of the factors, is in order to have this many lots, they need to have the circumference or the radius smaller?
In this instance, go back to the overall plat. I believe it would push, all of these lots a little bit further this way. I don't believe they would lose a lot. It would just redesign the cul-de-sacs a little bit. They might have to shorten, like the bulb would have to come up here a little bit, so more of these secondary lots would front on the bulb. But there is enough room over here to push some of these lots a little bit further south.
Okay, thanks.
We have a letter here from potential neighbors who are concerned about the entrance location. And you said something about that entrance in your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So in order to meet the town standards for that entrance, additional right-of-way needs to be acquired along 100 South. The petitioner's representative has reached out to neighbors to acquire the right-of-way, to purchase it, and has not been able to obtain any.
And is this on the north side of 100 or on the south side?
Majority on the south side. The way the design has come out, this lot would be extremely affected because of the closeness of that house to the right-of-way, which pushes the additional lane to the south side. So the petitioner's representative has not been able to obtain that right-of-way that they need for that purpose. The town's standpoint is always for safety, and it hasn't occurred according to my town manager, but the town would be willing to step in to acquire the right-of-way if it's needed for safety, which the petitioner would reimburse the town back for.
Are there plans for 100 South, as far as like improvements, since that's a main road, through Avon?
I'm not able to answer that. I don't know the plans for it at this time.
So I just want to make sure I understand, in order for this entrance to meet the requirements, there needs to be an acquisition of land on the south side of 100 South, correct?
Unless there is a complete redesign of the intersection, which also could happen.
And the owners of that land have not been able to reach an agreement with the petitioners, correct?
Correct.
And the town of Avon is not willing to step in to assist with that?
No, the town's not willing to forego our safety standards
Oh,
for
okay,
street
okay.
construction. And it would be up to town council to acquire the right of way, but it could happen, and that would need to happen under the current design of that intersection.
So this project can't go forward without the acquisition of that land? Or without a major redesign
If it was
of the entrance?
redesigned, it would likely need waivers and would have to come back to you. As it's proposed here, acquisition would be necessary.
But tonight, we're not making any decisions on entrances, correct? We're making it simply on this plat and the waiver,
They have
correct?
not requested any waivers at that entrance, so they would have to meet town standards at that entrance to go to construction.
So we could, okay, so this is the preliminary approval, but the sticking point regarding the entry, we might have to deal with later.
If they have to go back and redesign, they would have to come back to you.
Or if there's a decision by the town council to step in.
If the town council steps in and acquires the right of way, then they would meet the standards and could go forward.
Okay, okay. Any further questions for staff? If not, we'll have the petitioner come forward. Please state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Do you have my presentation? And a clicker, maybe?
Okay, hold on. Just hold on. We're getting to it. Is your microphone on?
Seems to be on. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. My name is Melissa Gerard from Pulte Homes, and I have with me tonight Wade Banning and Lance Farrell from Banning Engineering. If you have any more technical comments that I'm not able to address. I'm very happy to be here before you tonight to bring back Rivendell, which we think will be a very nice community to be added to the town of Avon. We've worked very hard over the last couple months with your staff on a number of issues. I'm gonna see. So this shows you where it is. I think everybody knows at this point, north of 100 South. This is the current, it's colorized version of the primary plat. As you can tell, it hasn't changed very much since the zoning approval was given for this. We're still at 39 new lots. Now, I will say when we filed this originally, the Derringer remainder was not part of the plat. Staff, which is now called Block A. Staff requested that we bring that into the plat. I've spoken with the personal representative of the Derringer estate. He's amenable to that. I think the primary reason is for the right-of-way dedication, and he is also amenable to that. The trail that was mentioned across the Derringer parcel on Block A, the reason that it isn't shown on here is because I was not aware of this issue until the staff report came out. It was not mentioned at our TAC meetings, so I didn't see it until I think, Friday. But that said, we have no objection to providing that trail on the Derringer parcel, although for the reasons that I'll talk about later, we'd kind of like to leave open the option of making a contribution in lieu. That's one option available to us when the right-of-way for the road isn't available at the time. And we think it would make sense, rather than connecting a trail that isn't going to connect to anything right away, for the town to just do it later as part of a larger roadway improvement that we would help contribute and fund. These are some of the sample elevations that I showed at the zoning. This is still what we're anticipating here. These are similar to the larger series of homes at Brookstone. I actually submitted to staff very detailed elevations of all the floor plans and all the elevations that we have at this time for all of those models. I'm not saying we wouldn't do a refresh at some point in time or update some things, but staff would review that as part of the condition on this primary plat approval because we are relying on the enhanced architectural standards for some of these lot standards. Those homes would have to meet the enhanced architectural standards, and staff would review that, and we're amenable to that condition as well. So I want to talk about I guess the right-of-way issues are the elephant in the room. As staff mentioned, I did try and contact individually everybody, and I'm going to go back for just a second. So we need a little bit of right-of-way on the north side, on the west. Those property owners are amenable and have given us or signed an agreement to give us the right-of-way for what we need there. The cutout between the Derringer and the Canac parcels, that is Mrs. Plummer's property. I've spoken with her too. I don't know that it's as significantly impacted as staff maybe indicated. There's a small little taper that would extend, but the taper stops short of her driveway per the current design. The right-of-way would be larger than that, but the actual pavement edge would stop short of her driveway. It would be all to the west of her driveway. The bigger issue is obviously the south side of the road, and none of those neighbors have been willing to grant right-of-way or even have any discussion in terms of pricing for that. So it's not an issue of that we weren't willing to pay for it, because we offered everybody kind of the prorated per acre price that we're paying for the land, and I never indicated that was a cap either. So that's kind of where that lies. We have talked to the town. We're still exploring solutions to this problem. We've discussed several design options, but the bottom line is I think our engineers and Mr. Moore have come to the conclusion there really is only one way to design this road because of the topographical constraints on both sides of the road. There's basically a bottleneck as you get to the north and south. On the west side, there's very limited area where we can actually run a road because of the drop-offs on both sides. So the current plan is really, I think, the only engineering design for this. The question is, what options are there going forward to actually make the improvements on the road that are necessary? So I would just say we're working on a couple of solutions. Our preferred option, and maybe most likely, is a simple cash contribution to the town in lieu of the improvements. We are in the process of trying to quantify the improvements that we can't make due to lack of available right-of-way, and we would work that out with the town and give them a check. And that, for a lot of reasons, makes a lot of sense because, as you'll see later on, this road needs a lot more improvements than just our project. We didn't cause the problems. The problems are there now on 100 South. We didn't cause them. We aren't even really contributing to them materially. We submitted a letter from A&F Engineering in connection with the zoning that said we really aren't contributing any additional traffic significantly to this roadway issue. I guess I kind of go over some of the existing conditions here that need to be addressed, but I'm going to start with the tree on the north side of the road on Mr. Milstead's property because the picture on the left was forwarded to me this morning by staff. The other two pictures on the right, I pulled down off of Google Earth this morning. I think that they were probably taken in 2023 is what Google Earth said. So they're a little bit older, but the conditions really haven't changed very much. You can see that that tree is actually closer to the right-of-way than that pole that's in the background. And actually, I've talked to Banning. We think that tree is currently in the assumed right-of-way for 100 South. It's certainly closer to the pavement than the transformer in the second picture. And then in the Google Earth picture, you can see that the tree has been trimmed recently, and those are street side cuts. There are no utility poles running parallel to the roadway on the south side of the road. Those cuts have been made because of conflicts with vehicular traffic. So that was why those trimming was needed. There are no curbs, no shoulder at all on 100 South. I think it's only by the grace of God that somebody hasn't wrapped themselves around that tree already. All it would take would be a slip on a piece of ice, and you could run into that tree so easily, which raises a whole host of liability issues for both the town and the landowner because they own to the center line in the unassumed right-of-way. I think that there was question about whether there had been any planning for what's going to happen to 100 South, and indeed there has. Both the town of Avon and Hendricks County have studied what should happen to 100 South, and this was way before Pulte even came along with a glimmer of our eye on Rivendell. Avon's thoroughfare plan is showing 100 South as a major collector. The county thoroughfare plan is actually showing 100 South as a minor arterial, which is significantly a step up in terms of conveyance of traffic from a major collector. Both thoroughfare plans are calling for 100 feet of right-of-way on 100 South, 50 feet from the center line on each side. We are giving 60 feet along both the Knack and Derringer, which is more than our fair share of the 50 feet of the right-of-way. Plus, we're committing to make the trail improvement along the Knack version and the Derringer parcel as well, although I'd like to maybe wrap the Derringer parcel in with any contribution in lieu we might make. So we are doing our best to be part of the solution for 100 South, but the problems exist with or without our subdivision. They exist today, and they aren't getting appreciably worse because of our subdivision. The county and the town both know that things need to happen to improve the safety of 100 South, and I trust that they'll act accordingly. I'm going to go back a little bit. I haven't really covered the variance request or the waiver request. The main reason for the variance request is to allow us to preserve some topographical features, preserve some trees along the west side and some trees along the east side.
We need you to wrap it up.
Yep, that's fine. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to address them.
So yeah, question for you. So we're
Yes.
here to talk about the preliminary plat approval and the waiver. And so the question I asked for staff, so if you could follow up on that with regard to the waiver, if you were to still comply, so not seek the waiver, right? If you were to meet the 60-foot radius, would that impact the number of lots in your development, or would the number of lots remain the same?
I don't know, but it would require us to take out a significant more number of trees. Also, I will say it's going to push the pond a lot further south. Right now, we've kind of designed that line between the Derringer parcel and the rest of our subdivision to avoid taking in the Derringer pond into our subdivision detention, but that pond may be getting partially filled a little bit as part of this project. The Derringer estate representative wants to fill it anyway, so we may be able to, use some of the area there as freeboard, but I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but my understanding is that it's primarily to preserve the desirable aesthetic features on the project.
Can your engineer speak to that, whether that would impact the number of lots?
Wade Banning Engineering, 853 Columbia Road, Suite 101. The cul-de-sacs, part of that does have to do with the amount of pavement. So we are trying to stick with the staff's recommendation on that. But it would make maintaining the amount of lots a little more difficult. And per Melissa's response as well, the detention pond is already getting pretty close to the property line to the south. So it would require us to shift the property, going back to the fact that it would be more difficult to maintain those lots. It would require us to shift the property line south, which would then also shift that pond south. And we're already getting pretty pinched in and being able to meet our requirements on the pond in that particular location.
So yes or no, would it decrease the number of lots?
Well, I will just say this and I'll answer. This project is not likely going forward for less than 39 lots. So if it does impact the number of lots, the project likely will not go forward.
That's what I'm just trying to, I just want to, and again, I think you've answered the answer, but we've seen petitions before where, and again, I appreciate the desire to preserve trees and whatnot, but we also understand that developers are in a business to make money. And so lot size or lot numbers, matter. And so that's what I'm trying to get at is, are you looking for a waiver so that you can maintain 39?
Well, I don't know if there would be a way to jimmy rig it so that we could keep 39 and still meet the pavement request, but this seems the easiest and most acceptable way to everyone. Staff supported it. The fire department didn't have a problem with it. The school board has been involved in our TAC meetings and they haven't cared about it, mainly because they're going to pick the children up. We're going to build a shelter for them down on 100 South. So that's where they'll pick the children up. But we have a lot of, if we have to put more pavement, that shifts everything further west. And we have a lot of grade issues. And some of those lots are really to the point where we can't move them any further to the west and still have buildable lots because the fall off is so much. Now, we might be able to pick up the pavement on the south by negotiating further with Mr. Derringer. I don't know. But given what we have to work with right now in terms of available land, I don't know. We could try and redesign it, but if we lose more than, if we don't have 39 lots, this project likely it won't go forward.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you. We now have the opportunity for those who would remonstrate against this project to come forward for a total of 10 minutes. Because there's 10 minutes for everyone, we restrict each individual to 2 minutes. So if there's anybody who would like to come forward, who would like to speak against this project, now would be your time to come forward. I'm sorry? Oh, we have somebody signed up for it? Yeah, let's go by the sign-up sheet, yeah.
Move the podium over from that lady so she doesn't have.
Who's the first person?
The first person signed in is Battistini.
I won't take too long. I appreciate your time. My name is Pete Battistini. I live at 6576 Lake Forest Drive in Avon. And is it possible to bring up the map? I'd like to point out where I'm located in regards to that. All the way to the north, if you look at the northwest corner, there's a little green there. From that very point of the northwest corner, Right. You go about 300 feet to the east, and that's my property. I'm adjacent to that right there. And one of my concerns that I'm not hearing much about is drainage. And what happens when this property is developed and permanent structures are in place. So there is a considerable topography situation there. In fact, if you'd allow me to read this real quick. My wife and I own approximately 300 feet of property that's directly aligned and adjacent to the north side of this proposed development, once owned by the Canick family. A line of sight view from my backyard, the property is at various degrees of a higher grade of terrain. In fact, part of the topography includes an immediate 12-foot steep incline from the lowest point on my property to the highest on the proposed development. Again, right there at that line. The terrain of my property, as well as the proposed development adjacent to mine, is most unique. Unique, in fact, that Pulte has amended the plat more than once due to the topography. As owned by the Canick family, the Riverdale land was once a part of the county, but now, thanks to a voluntary rezoning that required no public input, a county representative, and that individual, Hendricks County Surveyor David Gaston, tells me the Hendricks County Drainage Board has no authority or oversight with the property now being part of the town of Avon. Mr. Gaston also said he attended a meeting of the Avon TAC, Technical Advisor Committee, and, quote, expressed to them the concern of the county commissioners about the northern lots of this proposed addition causing a negative impact to the residents of Forest Lake, which is where I am. That's the end of his quote. I asked the Plan Commission to address this drainage concern, possibly contacting the TAC, the Technical Advisor Committee, and seek some input about drainage at that particular point prior to approving this plat. It is my hope that the Plan Commission agrees that I have a legitimate concern and will postpone or take whatever action in approving this preliminary plat. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who's next on the sign-up list?
Jeff and Wanda Ashcraft.
Please state your name and address.
Wanda Ashcraft, 6547 East County Road, going 100 south. My husband and I moved from Cedar Lake, Indiana. We lived on Highway 41, right out of Chicago. It's a brilliant highway. We decided to move to a nice country road, not knowing that it was going to be turned into a 4-lane road at our house by taking our property
Against our will.
against our will.
Sir, you need to let her speak for herself.
She's site challenged.
I am site challenged. This is my son, Jeff. This is Grammy's tree. This tree has been here for at least 200 years. It is the tree my granddaughters found. They could see from Dan Jones. They knew they were getting close to Grammy's house when they came. It is in direct line of this project. This is a very bad place to put this intersection. In case you've never been on this road, it comes right over a hill. And anybody trying to turn into this subdivision is going to get hit. I don't care if you put a bypass that's going to go around. People are still going to go straight through. Have you never been on the roundabouts going on 100 South? People drive that way. They're not going to take that bypass. they're going straight through. And when they top that hill, they're not going 35 miles an hour. By the time they get to that hill, they're going 50, 60 miles an hour. You need to take and find another place to put that outlet. I understand you want this subdivision. That's okay. But you cannot put that intersection there. Someone is going to get hurt or killed by that intersection. We moved from a place that happened all the time. Also, you just talked about making a pond bigger. We do not have a retention pond on our property. You're talking about that retention pond going through a culvert underneath the highway, coming in
To our yard.
to our front yard. How many people in this room, I'd like to see hands, how many people would let somebody put a culvert into their front yard
That runs down
from
the
a
yard.
retention pond that would run into their front yard?
Into our own pond. We own a pond. I'm on the list to talk to.
Eventually,
I'm sorry, but,
I'm on the list to talk to.
okay,
We-
then, sir, then please allow your mother to finish, and then you can sign in and finish up
right.
for 2 minutes, okay? We want to be
Yeah,
respectful of
I'm
everyone's
about-
time.
I'm about done. I will finish, but he can talk now. I'm sorry.
Our property that
Can you please state your name and address, sir?
Jefferson Ashcraft,
Address.
6151 Gregory Drive.
Thank you. Now you have 2 minutes.
Our property that they're going to take against our will is at a lower elevation than the road. They're not just taking the 12 feet plus the setback. They're going to have to grade down our property with riprap. Who wants a bunch of riprap in their yard? At the end of our property, we have a natural pond from 1964 that's spring fed with fish that we boat, that we swim. All the runoff from this property is going to come through our yard, not through a culvert. It's going to come through a culvert into our yard, drain down into our pond. All the pesticides, all the road salt, everything, all the simple greens for the yards is coming into our pond, just like your pond right there. We can't stop that. We don't want that. And we are going to fight all the way not to let that happen. They're going to ruin our property. We have a nice big lot. We could put a house on our second lot. And when they encroach, which they're not showing you the paper they showed us, that's fine. They showed us a paper that they're going to take the whole chunk section across the north side of our lot. Your plot plan shows the taper, and that's great, but that's not what they offered us. We don't want this project. It's going to be dangerous for people because they come up over that hill. People are going to be turning left. They're going to get rear-ended. There needs to be a traffic study to confirm what we already know. If you were to take, any one of us were to take your car and try to park off the side of the road there, you would most likely be scared to death of getting hit. I promise you that is a true statement. Our mail carriers will not even put post office boxes on the street because they're going to get rear-ended. That's our post office system. Now, if the post office is smart enough not to do it, the school bus surely doesn't want to do it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. You want to finish?
We need to move on to other people
Yep.
who have
I,
signed up.
I would like to tell you, I told you earlier, we came from 41. And we had the same situation. We lived outside of Cedar Lake and we had a 4-lane highway. And we lived at the top of the hill. And we were half a mile out of Cedar Lake. And by the time people topped our hill, they were hitting the gas real hard. Even the semi trucks had it all going on. We lived at 12011 Wicker Avenue and 119th Avenue was a T road and it went the other way. Now, at least once a month, somebody was getting hit trying to turn into 119th.
Thank you, ma'am.
And we got used to the fire trucks and the ambulances and the wreckers. But the day that really hurt us was the day that we stood there and watched a van that was tipped over with 6 children and 2 teachers burned to death. And this is the same scenario. And you need to find a different outlet. You just need to find a different outlet. It's the same thing.
Thank you, ma'am. Next person on the list.
Jerry Allen.
My name's Jerry Allen, and I live on 100 South. And
Can
I
you
own
please
2
state your
lots.
address, sir?
I own 2 lots at
I'm
66.
sorry. Can you please state your address?
That's what I'm starting to tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
I live at 6635.
Okay,
I own the land at 6471, 6473, which is at the part of what you guys trying to take. The traffic's going too fast all the time. Sometimes I go to the mailbox, I might have to wait for 20 cars to go by so I can cross the street. That's maybe one way, heading toward Presswick. Then I gotta wait for the traffic to go north, or not north, but east. So I gotta pick my time to go across the street to the mailbox. And my other concern is the runoff you're putting into your pond that runs into my pond. The pond has never run over the spillway, but it's came close several times when we had large rains for maybe days. So your runoff that you're getting from your roofs and your streets that goes to your pond, how much more water are we going to receive from that runoff? Because does your pond seep the water in the ground? How much does your water take before it runs out of your pond into my pond? And then I got to worry about the chemicals. We swim in the pond, we fish in the pond. Now we got a neighbor, it's probably not here because we haven't notified yet, that the overflow, it's never overflowed, flows onto another property behind us. I've got to go talk to them and tell them we're going to have to redesign our runoff because it's going to have to come off onto you because the water is going to be more than what maybe that dam can hold, because I've seen it 4 foot high in that pond when we had large rains for several days. So I'm concerned about your runoff, concerned about your chemicals you put on your lots, and I'm just worried that we're going to end up having some trouble. But main thing is we need to slow the traffic down too. Because it is, we pull out of our driveways, I'm on the top of the hill on both sides. When I pull out, I see cars coming up over the hill before I get started. They're up on my bumper. I don't drive fast. I used to. And I've lived here all my life. I've even worked here at this pond, this lake. I used to run the night shift to the pay lake here. And I know the people that own the lake. I know the history of the lake. I know the history of Avon. So, you know, it concerns me, you know, people come in, want to put addition, make some money, but they don't consideration of the people of Avon. I'm proud of Avon.
Thank you, sir. Next person to sign up?
Stephen Kim Millsteel.
Oh, so he's going to sit back there. Okay.
You might want to pull the microphone down.
I think I will.
There you go.
How's that? My name is Kimberly Milstead. I live at 6617 East County Road South with my husband, Steve. We purchased the home almost 1 year ago. It'll be a year, August 21st of 2023. Previous to this home, we lived in Brownsburg for 27 years. We started looking for a home with more of a country feel 4 years prior to buying our home on East 100 South. We have 1.25 acres on the south side of East 100 South. We have 14 to 16 trees in our front yard, and yes, ours is the one with the infamous sign. That is the huge oak tree that must be about 100 years old. I'm not going to say whether it's in the right of way or not. I don't know. I'm in the medical, was in the medical field, not in any kind of other thing like that. That oak tree is, as Wanda said, a sign for our family and friends to know where to turn into our driveways. My mother even calls it the canopy because it goes, kind of swoops over 100 South. My husband and I are not in favor of the homes Pulte Group wants to build. We are not interested in selling any of our property and not sure it is even allowed in our mortgage. We believe the creation of an XL decel lane, we do not believe that we believe it will cause a driving hazard due to the other previous residents of what they've spoken about the hilly lane coming up from 625 heading east. It is very dangerous. The construction mess, upheaval, and inconvenience it will cause, in our opinion, is unnecessary. My husband is the Whitestown Fire Marshal, and he is on call 24/7. He makes emergency runs from our home, and this construction will cause slowdown in his response time. I have physical disabilities, which the construction will create more difficulties for me, not only walking in my own front yard, but crossing the street to get to the mailbox. Why destroy trees and habitat of many wildlife that live in and around the properties that have been asked to sell off some of their land? There are turtles, squirrels, raccoon, fox, deer, hawks, and a bald eagle that has a nest in our 3 properties. So you might want to consider that. I think they have some kind of protection. I'm not really sure. Pulte Group has offered my husband and I $1,600. And I beg to defer, or beg to differ, excuse me, with Ms. Gerard. We have received one letter for $1,600. She has not contacted us in any way, shape, or form at all. And as a matter of fact, when my husband spoke to her, because I believe he has dealt with her in Whitestown before, I'm not sure, she told my husband, there's really nothing else we can do. We don't have any money, blah, 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 blah. So there has been no other offer. But to my husband and I, that money doesn't mean anything. It's not us holding out for money. It's the issue that this is our retirement home. We purposely bought this home because of the beauty of our land. And like I said, we don't agree with, go build your houses somewhere else. There's 39 of them, for crying out loud. You're putting them behind a whole bunch of other homes and property. You've heard all of the issues it's creating. Yes, everybody on the south side of East County Road 100 South does not want this. And we will not willingly sell our property. There's plenty of property in Hendricks County. They can build somewhere else.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Oh, drop the pen.
Do we have anybody else signed up?
Oh,
Just
thanks,
hang
Lauren.
on just a second, please. Do we have anybody else signed up?
Nancy Plummer?
Okay.
I am Nancy Plummer. I live at 6572 East County Road, 100 South. I'm the property in between Chucky's and the Canics. I have two issues, and my biggest one is where my driveway, they want to start the deceleration lane right at the edge of my driveway. Anybody with common sense will tell you right now, I've got a teenager, got a lot of teenagers that come over, got a lot of family, a lot of brothers and sisters that come. Anybody that you're starting deceleration lane right at the edge of my driveway, okay? People are going to think I'm pulling in, or my kid's pulling in to the addition, the subdivision. And they're going to not slow down thinking that I'm just going to continue on and we're going to get nailed in the butt. And so I'm in the medical field. I understand what happens with rear end injuries, even if it's a 20, 30 mile an hour. And if this council approves this is going to be a major issue that I think you guys should be held accountable if there is any injury of someone getting rear-ended. And I know that sounds crazy, but I talked to Mr. Cannon, and he said, well, maybe you should consider that including the other side of your driveway and the whole front part of your yard as a deceleration lane. I'm like, that doesn't make any better sense, because then they're really going to think we're turning into the subdivision versus turning in off of 100 South into our driveway. So I think danger-wise, it's everybody's driving, and you'll see it, 50, 55 miles an hour on that road. It's crazy, especially the motorcycles. But Mr. Cannon said there are other options. They could shorten the deceleration lane and start it at Pulte's property by lowering the speed limit, which for all of us, I think would be a great idea. It's 35, but I'm telling you, they're driving 50 to 60 on that road, and that's not your fault, obviously. Second issue I have is a drainage issue. They're talking about, and Chuck has every right to fill in his pond, whatever. I have a swamp in my backyard. I've addressed it through engineers. They said I have a swale. It comes off 15 acres and it comes right through the middle of my property and my backyard. I can't even use the middle. So I use it as a nature preserve, but I can't even get back there to mow. So I have to weed eat for 12 hours at a time to get that down. So that's going to be another problem, because if you look at where the pond that they're trying to build, and if they have to now move it further south and shorten that pond, I don't really think that's going to address my issues. I think that all the housing and is going to be a problem with the runoff, and then running obviously onto the south side of 100 South. So that's two major issues for me in my personal. But I did notice that on your thing about approving, that you talk about safety and security for all people. And I think you need to take that in consideration for their families and for mine, that 39 other people bringing in maybe 2 to 3 cars, it's going to create a major problem at that on 100 South. If there's any other way to look at some outlet behind the water park or whatever, or through the subdivisions that come off of 620 or Avon Avenue. That's just things that maybe they haven't thought about because they just keep avoiding what's the problem. So she keeps calling it a sliver of my property. That sliver is huge for me because we just built a garage, a 24 by 24 foot garage, did the variance of 60 feet from the middle of the road, which we followed Hendricks County. And now they want to take a sliver and then take more property of a right of way even closer to that garage where a lot of the teenage kids hang out. It just puts me in a major dangerous position. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Are we at our 10 minutes? Okay. Is there anybody else who's signed up?
There was one more.
Is there any objection to hearing one more? Okay, who
Ann
did we
Plummer.
Ann Plummer, 241 North Raceway Road, Indianapolis. This is my sister's land, right next to the property. There's no space in her yard to turn around to be able to head out of her driveway. You can't see to the west, but there's 2 dips, and you look both directions. By the time you look back, there's somebody coming. You can't back out very safely because you can't see the people. There's 2 lanes now, and you're going to go to 4 lanes with a left turn lane and a right turn lane. And it's just not safe now. And take that easement, it's going to go all the way fairly close to the new garage that was built. And there's not enough parking spaces now when we go over there, when her kids are there. The traffic is terrible. They speed. People are just going to have to learn how to slow down. Like other places that don't have access lanes to get into their houses or business. People will just have to slow down. It's not fair to take the people's property that have lived here for all these years for the convenience of some other addition. They need to do something else to figure out that entrance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who would like to speak in support of this proposal? Okay, would the petitioner like to provide rebuttal?
So I would observe initially, I haven't heard any comments that go to the issue of the waiver. We would respectfully request that you approve the waiver for the reasons that we've asked for and with staff support on that item. Secondly, I would note, I would reiterate what the commission president noted initially, that this is a ministerial decision, and if we meet the requirements of the ordinance, the approval is a ministerial obligation. It is not discretionary. And again, I haven't really heard too much that goes to the specifics of the ordinance as well, other than staff's recommendation that we meet the requirements of the ordinance. I would note that the issues of the entrance design and the right-of-way acquisition Number one, Pulte's not taking anything. We don't have the power to do that. Neither, but I would also note, neither is this plan commission. It is not your obligation or duty or even responsibility to deal with issues of right-of-way acquisition or takings. That is a different decision for a different body on a different day. It is not something that needs to be decided tonight. That said, as I've indicated several times, we're working on a solution that would just require a cash contribution and not actually the taking of property at this point in time. Although, you know, that to some extent is kicking the can down the road, but both the Hendricks County and the Avon thoroughfare plan indicate that this area is sorely in need of much larger roadway improvements than even are necessitated by Pulte's plan development. I don't really have too much more to say on the roadway improvements, except that it's not an issue before you tonight. It's a decision for a different body on a different date. However, I would note, I do want to spend some time talking about the drainage issue. And I would also note, nobody in here tonight is a traffic engineer, including Banning Engineering, although they are the only engineers in here. This has been a subject of continual discussion between your traffic experts and our traffic experts outside of this meeting. We're working on a design that is a compromise that meets everybody's objectives here and is the best public safety solution that we can come up with. In terms of the drainage, we have also put a great deal of effort into documenting our compliance with your drainage standards. We've been to not one, but 2 TAC meetings on this right now, because in addition to the primary plat, we have actually filed fully engineered construction plans, and we had a meeting last week on those prior to this meeting. So both Mr. Ilko and Mr. Gaston too at the county have had the benefit of seeing our drainage calculations, and actually our comments are quite minor at the last TAC meeting. Mr. Battistini's comments about the drainage to the north. Number one, I would note that we are not going to be, that's the way the water goes now. We're not going to be sending any more. Mr. Gaston did note that the county didn't have any jurisdiction over our drainage because we meet Avon standards in that regard. However, they did encourage us to voluntarily consider directing downspouts on those 4 houses on the north of the subdivision to the south instead of to the north. And we are working on that solution as a voluntary good faith measure, although not required to meet the drainage ordinances. And they did request that we do that. As to the drainage to the south, I would note that that is the way the water goes right now. We are actually going to be detaining more on site, and it's going to be released at a lower rate than it is currently sheet flowing currently under current conditions. The pesticide issue, I'm not sure really that we can help very much, but I would note that there's probably more pesticide runoff from agricultural land than for residentially used properties. And I think, did you guys have anything else? Have I covered everything?
Sir, if you want to speak, you need to come to the podium.
While he's coming up here, I did want to make one other comment. The culvert that goes under 100 South is there now. So it exists currently. We're not putting one in, although we may replace it and make it better and newer.
Sir, it's not your time to speak. You've already had time to speak. Sir, if you cannot stay quiet, we'll have to ask you to leave the room.
It just seems unfair.
Sir, you've had your opportunity to speak. Thank you.
That's kind of what we do when we go into developments. We replace things that are broken along in the process. And so do you want to come up and?
Lance Farrell, Banning Engineering, same place as Wade does. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there is a great detail of design work, engineering work, working with the town of Avon, meeting ordinances, working with the county, meeting ordinances. I feel like it's maybe not known to the public, the detail that's involved, that the watershed that goes to where it's going is how we go, and we are required to detain it to be less water than is going there today. And I think sometimes people think that we're going to put a pond in and it's just going to outlet and it's going to go here. Well, that pond serves a purpose. When it rains, it fills up and we detain at a slower rate than what they would get today. So I just want everybody to understand in the crowd that that is the function of engineering and the meetings with the county and meeting ordinances and all that kind of stuff. If that makes any sense. I'm just trying to help clear up things.
Thank you.
So with that, since I believe that staff is in agreement that we meet the requirements of your ordinance, with the one exception being the waiver, that we think is well supported and has no objection really, we would respectfully request that you approve the primary plat. We still have some additional work to do. There will be construction drawings and house plans and things that need to be approved with staff, and we're working through those additional items. So that said, I don't have any objection to putting or either installing or paying for by virtue of the contribution in lieu of the trail on the Derringer piece that was requested in the staff report, or any of the other conditions in the staff report.
Thank you.
I could ask one question. And since you brought this up, I just wanted to follow this up on the cash contribution in lieu of obtaining right away. So that what you're proposing is that you would contribute cash to the town, and then the town would take the responsibility of obtaining right away instead
Well,
of
it's
you
the
as the
right of way
developer.
and the improvements, like we would pay you for the amount of asphalt, but
Right.
my position is probably that 100 South is in need of a lot more improvements than are really even going to be necessitated by Pulte's project. And to some extent, it makes some sense for you to do it all as a larger project than just take our money. For example, the tapers, if it weren't just as an entrance to a subdivision, that you may want more pavement there. It just depends on your design. But it gives you the flexibility to get a jump start on a larger project, should you so desire. It has advantages for us too in terms of, making us more nimble.
Okay.
But
And
yes,
and thank you. I mean, that's not part of this, but that's discussions you're having with the town now.
yes, we are having those discussions with the town.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Before we move on to discussion, I would like to suggest, no, sir, no, sir, we're finished with that. Thank you. I would like to suggest that we address the waiver first, since that seems to be the least, there was no objections to it from the community, and it seems the easiest one to address. And that's kind of how we have to do it anyway. Is that correct, Mr. Taylor? Okay, so I suggest we address the waiver issue first for the radius of the cul-de-sacs.
Okay. But if the underlying doesn't get approved, then the waiver, even though we approved it, kind of gets lost in space, correct? So we can approve the waiver, but if we turn down the summary plat, then, okay. So just want to make sure we know that.
But we have to address the waiver. The waivers have to be done before the plat.
No, you don't. Is that right?
Yes, she's right.
She's right. Okay.
However, if we approve the waiver, then the plat meets the ordinances, so then it becomes ministerial. So approving the waiver is basically saying we're approving the plat.
Assuming that we agree with staff's recommendations that it's met all of the requirements.
Good point.
So we do have a metric that we can use, and we've been in this place before where staff has made a recommendation and say, we believe that they meet all the metrics. And we have looked at each of those metrics and said, well, we don't think this metric has been met, or this metric has been met, or standard, and have come out with a decision that is different from staff. So we do have It is, if we agree with staff, it is ministerial, but we would have to agree that with staff, some recommendations as to each item. So as to the waiver on the cul-de-sacs, what is the, I will start by saying, it doesn't sound like we have a standard of 60. I think she said Plainfield uses 50. A lot of communities use 50. Brownsburg uses 55. Is that correct? So, and we've got approval from the fire department, the schools, who all believe that these are workable. So I'm not sure why we put 60 into place. Maybe just we were trying to be extra generous. I don't think it's a request that is out of the norm for what we would see in other areas. And like you pointed out, Paul, this may be something that we'll need to go back and revisit within the UDO itself if this is a regular request.
The thing that is brought up during the discussion, I mean, drainage is a major issue. And we hear that in a lot of places in Avon. And something Linda said is that by reducing the amount of asphalt, we're reducing the amount of impervious roadway there that would contribute to drainage. So, and that's something that we've looked at over the years too, is trying to reduce that. So it does help that, you know, they've checked with the fire department. The fire department says that they can't handle that. Schools don't send buses down any streets anymore. They have cul-de-sac, at least they didn't when my kids were in school. So schools would say they aren't impacted there. So as far as the waiver goes, I think we need to look at what the UDO has, but with the research that Linda says that she and staff have done, 50 feet seems to be a de facto standard on that. I do want to.
Do we, I don't know, Greg, maybe you have been here long enough that you might recall if you were involved in any conversations about why there was a 60-foot radius as opposed to 50 or 55, which seems to be the norm.
I think we've kind of talked about it. We kind of used the county's blueprint to create our own initially, and that's probably where we got it.
But you don't recall there being any specific conversations?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just even add too, you're talking limited traffic in those cul-de-sacs. You've got 8 homes on one and 8 on the other one, so.
Thoughts?
I don't have anything else to add.
Bill?
I got nothing.
No?
Before we move forward, I do have something. So I'm just, and maybe this is for staff. So the staff report is written with criterion for the waiver. There's no details in there about the primary.
It's
Plat.
at the second, it's after that. There's the waiver and then there's the second part, I believe.
The findings of fact, as I read it, are for the waiver.
The UDO lays
Right.
out the findings you have to pay attention to for a waiver. The plat is just whether or not it meets the standards of the ordinance. It's not.
So if the waiver is approved, is there any point that we've discussed that where the primary plat wouldn't meet the requirements of the ordinances? Because I think as
Staff's
you've laid it
opinion
out,
that
then
it
all
would meet.
all the ordinances have been met.
But you didn't include the criteria in staff report, correct? For the plat approval.
And that's going to be,
The
and that's
ordinance
going to,
doesn't lay out findings for a plat approval. It's whether it meets the ordinance or not. It's not like a finding of fact for a waiver or a variance or a.
so that's going to be my question when we get to that point in the conversation is if you at a high level, and then if legal needs to join in, what that ordinance requirements are so that we can be able to say whether we agree or not as to whether it does meet those standards. So again, not putting the cart before the horse, but that's going to be my question when we get there.
So getting back to the waiver, is there any further discussion, comments, questions for staff or petitioner? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
We usually have the cheat sheet with the waiver language, so I would move that we approve the waiver as requested by the petitioner. Does it need to be anything more than that? I think we're good.
Could we add one condition to include addressing the 10-foot asphalt path in front of Block A per staff direction?
You know the wording better than I, so I'll let you make that motion.
I'd just amend his motion with that language.
Does that work?
Can we have specific language? We would need to have specific language, I think.
That we include the 10-foot asphalt path in front of Block A be included in the design per staff's recommendation.
We've had a motion. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, we didn't hear that full motion. We did do motions, apparently. We each thought the other was going to print them, so I apologize for that. Motion was to approve the waiver
So
with the condition.
are you going to do the motion or you want me to?
You go ahead and do that and I'll second it.
Okay.
For the waiver or for the?
Recommend the approval of map 2408 Rivendell primary plat, subject to the conditions as outlined in staff report. And in addition, add a condition of including a 10-foot asphalt path in front of Block A or a cash contribution as determined by staff working with the petitioner.
That was for the plat or the waiver?
The waiver.
That's part of the waiver. Yes, I'm sorry, I confused the two, but
Okay. we got it.
waiver A.
Second.
Having heard a motion and it having been seconded, we now take a vote.
Ransberg,
For?
Guckenberger,
4.
Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike.
4.
Motion carries, waiver is granted. Now moving on to the plat approval.
Before we get in the motion, I have a question for staff. So a lot of concerns have been raised tonight about drainage, traffic, safety. And the petitioner brought this up, that's not part of what we're looking at here. For the public, when do those discussions get held so that they're aware of that?
Well, so Paul, to jump ahead of that. So if you could answer, because I think my question goes to that, right? If you could review for us what are the standards for approving a primary plat approval, right? Because again, it's a, what's the term again?
Ministerial.
It's ministerial, right? So if it checks those boxes, we have to approve it. So can you review that and then talk, and also if it doesn't address all of Paul's question, we can answer that too. So if you could at a high level review those boxes, so whether we agree with you or not.
So when you review a plat, you start with the zoning requirements. So you check lot size for each lot, lot width. You check then standards for the street. So how long the street is limited to be, how long a cul-de-sac is limited to be, how wide the right-of-way needs to be, how wide the pavement needs to be, then how wide the sidewalk needs to be. It's turning radius, radii in this case, whether or not the cars at that northern cul-de-sac bulb could get around. That was talked about and addressed at our TAC meeting. That's the standards of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations that are part of the review. And then on top of that, stormwater is reviewed by our consulting engineer. In this case, they've been to TAC twice. They were at TAC for the initial zoning case, and then they've been to TAC now twice for the plat. So the stormwater is reviewed heavily. They also review the street standards. So I review them, but they review them from an engineer's perspective. I mean, we review things such as the street names and make sure they don't conflict with the E911 addresses. There's a long list of things, but that's generally high level.
Okay, so they meet the lot size, they meet the road width, they meet the sidewalk width, they've met the drainage requirements, right? So they've checked those boxes. When it comes to the entrance and the acceleration, deceleration, does that have anything to do with the plat approval?
They have to meet the town standards for the entrance.
And
And
so,
they have not requested a waiver of those requirements.
and so they've met the standards. And so because,
Yes.
okay.
Can you just briefly summarize what those standards would be for the entrance? So, because I know that there's been a suggestion that the entrance be moved, and you alluded earlier, or you actually stated earlier that I believe you said the entrance could not be moved further west because of the drop-offs on either side of 100. Is that correct?
I didn't say that.
Okay, never mind. Then I must have heard something else.
So
But can you just talk about what those requirements are for why the entrance needs to be there?
every new subdivision entrance in the town of Avon is required to have an A-cell, D-cell lane at the street entrance point on that side of the street, and then a left turn lane in the middle of the right road to get into it if you're turning left into the subdivision. So you end up with the A-cell, D-cell lane, which is more like a shoulder, the travel lane, the left turn lane, and then would be the travel lane in the other direction.
So it's adding a third lane in that section of the road.
It's adding a third lane plus the A-cell, D-cell.
Okay.
And so when street is designed and when the designs come to us to review, the Department of Public Works looks at that and determines, sometimes we have more flexibility on the north side of the road, so we move it a little bit to the north. Sometimes we have more flexibility on the south side. This one is obviously problematic because of the short distance that where the entrance is going to be has on 100 before that intervening property and then the rest of it. So where the street is going in, I can't answer within that stretch why it's at one place or another within the small portion that it is. But it's all reviewed and approved for the A-cell, D-cell, the left turn lane and such. And if they can't meet those standards, which they give them we can waive some of the standards with like how long the D-cell lane has to be or the A-cell lane, but all those things have to be there in order for the street to go in. And then if they can't, they need to add that waiver request before this body, which they have not requested.
There's not been a request to waive the town standards for the acceleration and deceleration lanes, the left turn lane, any of that. They've not asked that any of that be changed.
They have not asked, but we would not support it either because those are safety considerations that we would typically not want to. We can wiggle a little here, but we don't want to lose any of those requirements for a new intersection.
So I'm extremely familiar with that stretch of 100 as I live very close to there. And I know exactly what the community members are talking about as far as coming up that hill. I mean, there have been more than one time when I've thought to myself, I'm glad I don't live on this street because of the inability, because of the vision issues with trying to pull in and out of driveways. I also agree with petitioner's representative that, and I've thought this myself, this road needs to be widened. It is really an issue, and that's where the tension is. We have the people that love their road, love their tree, love living where they live. But it is, what did the county call it? The county called it a minor arterial.
Yes.
Yeah, that means there's a lot of traffic and there's just going to be more. And that's where we're a growing town. People want to move to Avon and we can't just put a brick fence around our town and say no more. Are you aware of any traffic studies that are being conducted or planned to be conducted on 100?
I'm not, unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of our Public Works staff here tonight to be able to
Okay.
answer these questions on 100 itself.
And is 100, is that section of 100 South owned by the town, by the county, by both? Or is it one of those conundrums?
Would you like to see the section? I guess.
No, sir, thank you. We're having our discussion now. Thank you for offering, though.
I don't know the answer well enough to be able to state it on the record.
Okay.
Who owns it?
Okay.
Say it's a combination of both county and town, but I'm going to say it's probably more county than it is town.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we now get to the plat approval. Did you have any other?
No, I appreciate
Mason?
the staff clarifying that. I am sympathetic. These are serious issues, the traffic, the road conditions. But we have a limited charge, right? Limited, while we may want to personally make decisions but we have a limited scope as to what we can review and what we can approve. And it's limited to the waiver we just discussed and whether they check all the boxes for the preliminary plat approval. And so that's something that I appreciate the passion from the public, and I hope they continue to raise that with the town council and the staff. But we are limited to what we can do tonight, and it's limited to, did they check these boxes? If so, we have to approve it.
Well, and I agree with that. And I also want to say thank you to all of you who showed up tonight, because it means that we have a community that is interested in what happens. There are so many towns that nobody shows up for any of their meetings, and we always are fortunate to have community members come and speak out. And whether you are in support of or against any proposal, we appreciate hearing from you, and we listen to what you say. We really do. And I think you can agree that we are concerned about the issues that you raised as well, which is why we have asked questions of staff and
Well,
hope that there'll be
think
further
there's
problems.
I think there's a silver lining for these people. We can approve the primary plat. However, within that approval comes the easements and the egress and the ingress, and they're going to have issues getting that. So they're going to have to come back to us to get waivers.
All right, this is just one step in the
So
whole
this is
process.
just one step. This isn't a yes to the whole thing. It's just, we're going to see these people again. And that's where it's going to become the difficult decision. Now it's no longer checking the boxes. It's either do we agree with them or we don't agree with them. And I think it's a bigger issue for both the town and the county because of the road itself. So.
I agree. Any further discussion on the plat approval? If there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that now we approve MAPP 2408 Rivendell primary plat per the conditions in staff report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Having been presented with a motion and a second, we can now take a vote.
Ransberg,
4,
Guckenberger,
4.
Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike, 4.
motion carries, plat's approved. I would strongly encourage my fellow Avoners, is that a word? To continue following this project and continue making your voices heard. We do listen to what you say, and we want you to be involved. And this is just one step of many for this to go forward. So, okay, moving on to next agenda item, PUD 2403, Avon Landing Apartments PUD amendment.
The motion to approve now.
Oh, and we can take a little 5-minute break. Recess. call the meeting back to order. Do we have everybody here? Oops, not yet. Okay. Waiting on the attorneys as usual. Isn't that always the case? Okay, we're moving on to agenda item PUDA 24-3, Avon Landing Apartments PUD amendment.
Thank you, President Ransberg. Members of the commission. PUDA 2403 is a detailed amendment to a planned unit development that was approved back in 2016. It is the Avon Landing planned unit development. This specific request would be to amend the planned unit development as it pertains to the Avon Landing Apartments on the east side of Ronald Reagan Parkway to revise the off-street parking and landscaping requirements, specifically to lower the off-street parking requirement from what was the zoning ordinance standard when the planned unit development was originally approved back in 2016 to what the UDO standard is today. Specifically, the standard in the old zoning ordinance was 1.8 parking spaces per apartment unit. The UDO only requires 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And then as far as landscaping, I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but it's pertains to landscaping of the parking lot and what we think are some minor changes there. As you're probably aware, Avon Landing is located on either side of Ronald Reagan Parkway, north of 200 North. The apartments, as I mentioned, are on the east side of Ronald Reagan Parkway, between Ronald Reagan Parkway and 1000 East. It's a 19-acre site. As I mentioned, the preliminary or the original planned unit development was approved in 2016. It was platted in 2018. The apartment site that we're dealing with received development plan approval in 2018. It was actually received a second approval in 2021, and the apartments have just recently finished construction. This is a copy of the overall site plan. There are 10 apartment buildings and a clubhouse building. That's a little bit maybe clearer view of it. There's 4 apartment buildings along the north. There's 2 along the west perimeter, closest to Ronald Reagan Parkway. Right here, there's the clubhouses there. And then there are 4 L-shaped buildings in the center of the site, if you will. And then there are 4 garage buildings as well outside of the L-shaped buildings. We think that the request to lower the parking standard to meet the current UDO standard is appropriate. We don't see any reason why this site should be regulated differently than similar developments throughout the jurisdiction. As it pertains to the landscaping, it was noticed upon reviewing. So this came in as a request to revise the parking standard down. And I think it's worth noting, there are 264 apartments here. The 1.8 spaces per apartment standard would require 475 spaces. The site actually was developed with 464 spaces. So what's there is actually a very minor deviation from what was required in 2016 and is still required by the PUD today. But the new UDO standard would only require 330 spaces. So they would far exceed that. But when the request came in and we reviewed the plans a little more closely, we noticed that there were a few deficiencies from the landscaping requirements as well. So the orange ovals on this exhibit show where there are rows of parking spaces that exceed 15 spaces in a row. The ordinance requires a landscape island to break up rows of 15 or more spaces. I think a couple of these rows, the shorter ones, such as here and here, they may be exactly 15. So they just barely would meet that standard to necessitate a landscape island. These two here are a little bit longer. And then the two red ovals are places where there's a double row of parking. Here and here, you can actually see it a little bit better on this exhibit. You can see where there's a double row of parking there and down here as well. What the landscaping, so the original planned unit development just incorporated the landscaping requirements from the old zoning ordinance at that time, which, as I mentioned, for rows of 15 or more spaces requires a landscape island to break those up. And then in the case of the double rows, there's actually, I think there's a couple things they could do. They could do an island across, or they can do a divider island that separates the two rows. So what this request would do is to actually change the landscaping standard in the planned unit development from the standards that were in place at the time that that was originally approved in 2016, which again, I said, as I said, incorporated the standards that were in the old zoning ordinance. Those standards would remain in place except to be modified by basically the plans you see here to not require them to go back and retrofit the parking lot in some way. And we do find that that request, we find that that's supportable and that the deviations are mitigated by the fact that there's significant stands of mature trees along the north perimeter, separating the site from the B&O trail, as well as a significant area here. There are some photos, I think, that demonstrate that in the staff report. So for those reasons, we do find that to be supportable. And we are recommending approval, or we would recommend that you pass this on to the council with a favorable recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, thank you. So the site's been completed, construction's done. If I understand it correctly from the staff report, the standard was or is 1.8 spaces, but once they completed construction, they found out they only meet 1.75. And so that's why we're needing to, this is why they requested this waiver, so that they can come into compliance. And so it's actually going to end up, are they going to end up taking away spaces then to go back to continue to go down to 1.25?
No, and that'll be a question you can address to the petitioner, but I don't see any reason that they would be taking away significant spaces. When they filed the request, they actually asked to just change the standard to 1.75 to exactly replicate what they have in place. We actually suggested that it would make sense for them to amend it down to the current UDO standard, again, because we didn't see any reason to regulate this development more strictly than other apartment complexes throughout Avon. Also, we thought it just might provide a little bit of flexibility in the case that they want to add some amenity at some point, and eliminate a few parking spaces if they don't have the demand for those, and then not have to come back and amend the PUD in order to do that.
Okay, so their math was just a little bit off, and now it's here so that they can fall into compliance, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
So then also you mentioned, so I want to make sure I understand, the recommendation is that no additional landscaping changes be made, that it stay, will you make the amendment to allow it to stay as built?
Correct.
Okay. But if we reduce the parking to 1.25, now they got extra parking spaces, they actually have space where they could go in and do what they were supposed to do in the first place when we approved the PUD and make those landscaping changes. Is that correct?
That would be feasible.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, petitioner may come forward.
Good evening. My name's Rob Toll. I represent Avon Landing Partners LLC, which owns this property. And to your point, yes, there was a simple math error, and I won't throw our civil engineer under the bus too hard, but for whatever reason, he used 256 units. We have 264. So when he laid out the parking, he was like, we're fine. We have 464 spaces. However, the PUD required that we have 475. The one thing that I will point out is typical underwriting, bank underwriting, appraisal underwriting, is that you always have 5% vacancy anyway. So 5% is 13 units. 13 times 1.8 would be 24 or 25 spaces. So if you, with that vacancy, we still have more than enough parking. Under the 1.25, we have more than enough parking. And to your point, yes, you could require us to go back in and add the landscaping. I would ask that we not be required to do that because it requires tearing up asphalt and tearing and putting in concrete islands. And all of those concrete islands, the grass in there, it's very hard to keep it growing in those in those islands. And once you start tearing up concrete, it starts crumbling a lot more after you've already laid all of the asphalt. So in working with staff, they felt like our recommendation was appropriate, and I would just ask that you approve as suggested.
Questions for the petitioner?
Yep, I'll follow up, so you might as well stay here, if you would, please. So to that, so when we did the PUD, and while I can't recall all the discussions that were held about this, but I'm sure that there was discussions about the preserving the tree line around the development. So that was probably part of the argument of putting the apartments in there. But the design and the ordinances required that landscaping. Can you explain why that landscaping wasn't put in? I know you don't want to go back in there, but that was a requirement of the PUD.
The landscaping that we have in there was all of the trees and bushes, which is significant. It's over $300,000 worth of landscaping and trees and bushes. The medians around the parking, they were not put in, not intentionally. I think the civil engineer missed that in the PUD ordinance, but it was more to make sure that we maximize the parking that we have in place.
So when we do a planned unit development, that's basically you coming in and laying out your requirements that you want us to approve for that planned unit development.
Correct.
Or that's the landscaping that you put in there that we approved and you agreed to. So the lack of that being implemented is put on the civil engineer again if he missed parking spaces, but somebody didn't build per design. So your as-built didn't meet your as-design. Is that, and you don't want to go back in and do what you were required to do under your planned unit development.
The design that you see here actually was approved by the town of Avon. So this is exactly what was built. I understand. So there was a disconnect between
required to meet the ordinances, right?
I understand that. There was a disconnect between the PUD ordinance and what was designed and ultimately built.
President Ransberg, if I may make a comment, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I do want to state for the record, and while I don't disagree at all with Mr. Guggenberger, that it is true that applicants, developers, petitioners are all obligated to meet the requirements of the ordinance, which would include the regulations in this planned unit development that incorporated the old zoning ordinance standards. It should also be mentioned for the record that planning staff back in 2021 did review this plan as part of the development plan approval or development plan review and did recommend approval of this, and it was approved by the commission in 2021. So they did build what they got approval for. They obviously didn't completely comply with the ordinance standards, and staff did not catch that in 2021 when it came through for approval. So I just wanted to make that clear.
And I appreciate that. My point is that with the planned unit development, the developer is bringing in a plan here. in laying out their requirements that they want that planned unit development, they're responsible for meeting those requirements because that's what, now help me here if I'm wrong, but they put forward as we wanted this PUD to develop to. So it's some deviations to ordinances. So maybe staff missed that. It is a staff's requirement to make sure that you follow the requirements in the PUD. So that's my only point here is that I understand you don't want to go back and have to retrofit in landscaping, but it seems like there'd be some other way to provide some other solution as opposed to we have a lot of trees around the perimeter that were already there. I'm sure we're part of the discussion that they were going to stay there.
There are also a lot of trees that we planted along Ronald Reagan and along County Road 1000. So we've added a significant number of trees.
1,000s to
Excuse me. Yeah, 1,000 on the east side.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for the petitioner? There being no one present to support or remonstrate against this particular, no, okay. We can go straight to discussion.
I appreciated Paul's observation and comments. I also appreciated staff's follow-up. There's, I don't know, how would I phrase it?
Plenty of blame to go around, I believe is.
I know that's what you're, yeah, I don't know what to say those exact words, but yeah, not everyone had clean hands in this situation. And so that makes me, given that, I'm receptive to the petitioner's request for the amendment, so.
I support it.
Well, let's entertain a motion.
I move that we approve or forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for PUDA 24-03 Avon Landing Apartments PUD amendment, parking and landscaping. A detailed amendment to a planned unit development to revise off-street parking, and landscaping requirements, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a planned unit development under state law.
I'll second.
Having heard a motion and having a motion seconded, we'll now take a vote.
His mic wasn't on.
My voice didn't carry enough.
One more time.
I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for PUDA 24-03 Avon Landing Apartments PUD amendment, parking and landscaping, a detailed amendment to a planned unit development to revise the off-street parking and landscaping requirements, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a planned unit development amendment under state law.
I'll second.
Having heard a motion again and a second again, we'll now take a vote.
Ransberg,
For?
Guckenberger,
Against.
Reed,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Pike,
Having a majority of the board members found to approve this motion, to approve this proposal, the amendment is approved. The proposal is approved. Okay, any other business?
Just one. Since we did get a copy, thank you staff, of the permitted use table. Question came up and I was asking Paul, should we take these and be responsible for bringing them back or leave them, which I would recommend so staff has them. And since Jennifer and Dave aren't here, they have all of them and give it to us each meeting.
I don't think we should be trusted to take these home.
Our thought was we would provide them for you every meeting.
That's a great idea.
Excellent idea.
Perfect.
I just want to give you an update on the BZA.
For the record, I gave mine to Paul.
The BZA last week did approve a drive-through for the new Panera that's going in in between Circle K and 7 Brew.
Okay, any other committee reports?
Redevelopment, in addition to invoice approvals, 100 South and Dan Jones Whiting updates. In addition to County Road 900 East and Angelino Way update, and approval of resolutions and bid awards as well.
Town council? Business as usual. All right, if we don't have anything else to offer for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned.